In the quiet outskirts of Vancouver, where the tall evergreens swayed like silent guardians, and the morning mist clung to the rooftops, lived a poor boy whose life seemed carved from hardship. Every day, he walked the cracked dirt path leading to the old cemon cow well, a forgotten spot where stray animals wandered and where children rarely played. For him, however, that lonely place was the only corner of the world where he felt free. His tiny home, barely held together with rusted nails and weather-beaten boards, overflowed with the sound of worry, grown-ups whispering about bills, about food, about cold nights. So he escaped to the well, not because it was beautiful, but because it was the only place where his voice could breathe. He stood there, shivering in a thin jacket that didn't protect him from the sharp Vancouver wind, yet he refused to stay silent. When he sang, his voice filled the air in a way that even the trees seemed to pause for. His tone was raw, cracked by hunger and shaped by sleepless nights, but it carried a strange kind of magic, one born from pain, survival, and unshakable hope. Each note he released into the hollow of the cemon cow well came back to him slightly stronger, like the world was giving him strength he didn't have on his own. In those echoes, he heard more than sound. He heard possibility. Most kids his age ran through playgrounds or kicked soccer balls, but he stood barefoot on cold stone, using his voice as the only tool he had to fight against the life he had been born into. His poverty wasn't a secret. It clung to him in the form of torn clothes, empty pockets, and a constant ache in his stomach. But what people never saw was the fire that lived inside him, a fire that poverty couldn't extinguish no matter how hard it tried. He believed that his talent was the only doorway to a better life. He didn't have tutors, music lessons, or fancy equipment. All he had was his voice, the cemon cow well, and the belief that one day the world would hear him. Sometimes, when he stopped singing to catch his breath, he would stare at the city's skyline in the distance. Vancouver's glass towers glistened under the sun like they belonged to another universe, one he could only dream of entering. Still, he whispered promises to himself. One day, I'll stand there. One day, the world will know me. Those promises were more than wishes. They were survival. They kept him walking back to the well day after day, even when his feet hurt, even when the cold cut into his bones, even when hopelessness tried to wrap itself around him. And so, in that lonely, forgotten corner of Vancouver, surrounded by silence and shadows, a poor boy with nothing but heart and talent dared to believe that dreams were real. With every echo rising from the cemon cow well, he proved, to himself first, that his voice was meant for something far bigger than the life he was born into. One bright afternoon in Toronto, as sunlight reflected off the glass buildings and traffic hummed its usual urban rhythm, something unexpected happened near the old cemon cow well. A passerby, a middle-aged woman hurrying home from work, heard a sound so pure, so emotional, that it stopped her in her tracks. At first, she thought it was a recording playing from someone's phone, but as she turned toward the broken stone well, she saw a thin, poor boy standing there, clutching his chest as he released a voice that didn't match his appearance. His voice trembled with hunger yet rose with hope, blending beauty and pain in a way that made the woman's eyes widen. The boy wasn't singing to entertain. He was singing to survive. Word spread quickly. People walking dogs, cyclists, shopkeepers, and even a group of teens drifted toward the well, drawn by the haunting sound. They gathered around in a slow circle, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disbelief. How could a boy who looked so worn down produce a voice with so much strength? His clothes were worn, his face pale from lack of proper meals, yet his voice carried the weight of someone who had lived through storms and refused to drown. Every run, every breath, every note revealed a story he didn't know how to speak in words. As the small crowd grew, the boy's reaction said everything about the hardship he carried. His hand shook. His voice wavered, not from lack of skill, but from the shock of being seen. For so long, he had sung alone beside that forgotten well, convinced that no one would ever care about his talent. But now, In the heart of Toronto, strangers stood silently, moved by the pure emotion in his voice. He looked up at them with wide eyes, unsure if he should keep going or run away. But something inside him, perhaps the same hope that brought him to the well every day, told him to continue. The echoes of the Cemon cow well amplified his voice until it seemed like the whole city could hear him. His sound bounced between buildings, rising above the traffic, cutting through the noise of everyday life. People passing blocks away slowed down, turning their heads. Shop doors opened. A bicyclist stopped mid-pedal. It was as if the city itself paused to listen. His voice had a gravity that pulled hearts toward it, a mix of innocence, pain, and raw talent that felt impossible to ignore. When he finally reached the last note, his breath broke, and the silence that followed was so thick it felt sacred. The crowd didn't applaud at first, not because they didn't appreciate him, but because they were stunned. It was the kind of silence that happens when something touches people deeply. Then, slowly, cheers erupted. Phones lifted. Cameras pointed at him. Tears glimmered in the eyes of grown adults who had never expected to be moved by a poor boy at an old well. In that moment, the boy realized he was no longer invisible. His voice had cracked open a doorway he had only dreamed about. And standing there, trembling with a mixture of fear, pride, and disbelief, he understood one truth: his talent was real, and it had the power to change his life forever. Within just a few days, the video of the poor boy singing near the old Cemon cow well spread across Montreal, and then across all of Canada with unbelievable speed. What started as a small recording made by a passerby suddenly turned into a viral wave sweeping across social media. People in busy cafes, office workers on lunch breaks, students in classrooms, and even strangers riding buses found themselves watching the same clip. A thin, hungry-looking boy with trembling hands and a voice powerful enough to silence an entire city. Comments flooded in, calling him Canada's hidden star, the voice born from struggle, and the boy who sings with a soul far older than his years. It was the first time in his life that people were talking about him not with pity, but with admiration. As the video gained millions of views, talent scouts, music producers, and television hosts began searching for the boy. They wanted to know who he was, where he came from, and how such a monumental voice had remained hidden for so long. The Montreal community quickly stepped forward to help. Neighbors, who barely noticed him before, began sharing what little they knew. Some people visited the well every day, hoping to catch another performance. Others brought him food, warm clothes, or just words of encouragement. For the first time, he wasn't alone. For the first time, people saw him, truly saw him. One morning, as he stood near the Cemon cow well preparing to sing again, a sleek black SUV pulled up beside him. Out stepped a well-known Canadian music producer, who had flown in specifically to meet the boy. Surrounded by excited locals, the producer asked him to sing just one song. Nervous, with his heart pounding like a drum in his chest, the boy closed his eyes and let the music rise inside him. And once again, his voice filled the air with the same raw emotion that had captured millions online. When he finished, the producer didn't hesitate. He offered the boy a chance to record professionally, a chance to step into the world he had only dreamed of from a distance. Everything changed quicker than he could understand. Within weeks, he was standing on stages instead of dirt paths, holding microphones instead of worn-out jackets, and singing under bright lights instead of gray skies. Interviews followed. TV appearances followed. People from around the world wanted to hear the boy from the Cemon cow well, the boy whose voice seemed shaped by struggle but strengthened by hope. His rise wasn't just fast, it was inspiring. Every headline reminded people that greatness can come from the most unlikely places. And through all the noise, success, and attention, one truth became clear: dreams don't care where you start, they care how fiercely you hold onto them. The poor boy who once stood cold and forgotten beside an old Montreal well now found himself standing at the edge of a new life, proving to the world that even from the darkest corners, a dream can rise high enough to shine like a star across the sky.